Welcome to Baseera Inner Reflections.
Assalamualaikum Warahmatullahi Wabarakatuh. Welcome to Baseera Podcast Inner Reflection. We are honored to have Ustadha Abeda Ahmed with us today. Welcome, Ustadha Abeda.
Jazakallah khair.
We're really thrilled to finally be able to have you on. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, Allahumma barik in everything that you do, Ya Rab. And we'd like to dive straight into our exciting topic for today, starting by asking you, who is Abeda Ahmed?
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for having me. It's like I said, it's a pleasure to be here. So I suppose that's a profound question, isn't it? So if I was to say, who am I suppose first and foremost, and it might sound like a cliche, but when you get to my age, I suppose there's only one way of answering that first and foremost, I'm a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am a mother of 2 children, mashallah.
MashaAllah.
And then I am one of 8 siblings, so a sibling to 7 other.
Allahumma barik. MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. And I'm also a psychotherapist with a few areas that I really enjoy working in. So one of them is that I'm a relationship therapist with a specialism in psychosexual therapy and also sex and pornography addiction. I also work quite closely with a local charity where we support parents in their parenting journey. And through that platform, we run programs, not just parenting programs, but also marriage programs. And I'm also quite involved in the local community, trying to address topics which are difficult for our community to address. So one of them being addiction, and especially sex and pornography addiction. So I do speak at lot of events, wherever I get the opportunity. So yeah, that's me. Jazakallah khair.
That is so deep. Wahyakum ya Rab. That is so deep, and it looks like your journey in psychotherapy is vast and has taken you in many paths, subhanAllah. But so far, the repeated theme is addressing a growing pandemic among the Muslim community, subhanAllah, that is so painful that we are seeing it in North America as well. I remember speaking to Sister Zainab and Sister Kauthar about it, unfortunately, subhanAllah, which makes us very curious to know what is your journey? What is your journey with psychotherapy? How did it start and how did it end up where it's not end up? How did it land here?
SubhanAllah, I think we all have our stories, don't we? So my story, I suppose, like many other women, was that before I got married, I was very ambitious and naive in a very different manner, where I didn't really truly understood my role as not just as a woman, but also as a mother, as a wife, and didn't quite understood the nuances and the responsibility. So when I did my degree, I was very much focused on thinking about working with the third world and working with charities and being able to. So I did my master's in development studies, and I was so keen and ambitious to go over with Oxfam and with Save the Children and go to Africa and, go to.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I was one of those ambitious and dreamy people. But subhanAllah, when I got married, I realized that my babies and my home needed me first and foremost. So, and I took that on really lovingly. I don't regret that. But alhamdulillah, then when my daughter was about 3, that's when I started my psychotherapy training. And mashallah, my daughter now is in her 4th year of dental school, mashallah. So
MashaAllah, tabarakallah.
you can see it's been more than 2 decades, two decades and 4 years already, alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah. So I started off mainly because I realized that they were in our community. And now obviously it's very different, because I'm talking about a time when you would that nobody would, no Asian, not let alone Muslim, would think about going to therapy. It was obviously a big, and there was not much provision. So the providers that I trained with, I felt very isolated in terms of visibility. So there were not many on my course at all. And the training was, as we still, I suppose, we still complain about that, isn't it? That trainings are mostly Eurocentric or very Western in their approaches. So, but alhamdulillah, I plowed through. And then gradually, I suppose in the last 10, 12 years, I've kind of really got the confidence to establish my own private practice. So now I'm, alhamdulillah, in a position where I'd solely just work through my private practice. And I would like to think that I'm in a position to help my community. May Allah accept it and keep us sincere, inshallah.
I mean, sounds really beautiful, mashallah. And, you know, I can really resonate with that, because I guess when we look at the models of psychotherapy and even psychology, it is very European centered, or, you know, Western, with the Western model. So how did you find that experience? Because it is very different. Sometimes it is quite challenging on the self, in a sense, when you're learning some of these theories, or when you're learning some of these approaches, especially in psychology. It does kind of, you know, beg the question of, like, you know, some of it, in terms of, like Sheikh Malik Badri said, that, you know, some of it is quite contrary to the teachings of Islam, and we take what is good, but we leave what is quite dangerous and wrong. So how did you navigate in that time when you, like you said, there wasn't that much support? Now, alhamdulillah, there is a lot more in within the UK, and obviously within around the world as well. But how did you feel at that time? Was it quite isolating, or did you just, you mentioned the word plowed through, which I think is a quite nice way of probably explaining it.
I think it was challenging, but I suppose in a way, because I was at that age where once you've experienced motherhood, you know, you feel a bit more confident and liberated. So I don't think I was that young, so I was probably in my early 30s. So that definitely gave me that confidence to accept my difference and then wanting to be visible. So I feel that I've always had that courage to say what I've really, that comes from the heart. So, and obviously I'm going back more than 20, almost 25 years. And I think that at that time, the way the narrative was that people were maybe very entrenched in their own understanding of things, but they were not very aggressively negative in that sense. So my experience of, well, if you might call it Islamophobia or whatever, was very different. So I always felt that my colleagues were gently curious, or they were, I would say they were naive and they didn't quite understand things. So I was in a position to maybe explore things and say, no, but my experience is this, or I see things this way or that way. But there was always that element of frustration, definitely, that there's just a very unidimensional way of looking at things. And then alhamdulillah, you know, it's just amazing. It's like you see this Islamic psychology, this whole wave of the content and mashallah, the thinking from, right, may Allah grant Professor Badri Jannatul Firdaus. So I was privileged enough to attend I was one of the last cohorts that he taught in Turkey. And subhanAllah, you know, I was just so mesmerized by him. I don't know if any of you had the privilege of working with him or learning from him. SubhanAllah.
Unfortunately not, but we have the privilege and the blessings of reading his knowledge and content afterwards. SubhanAllah.
And sitting with their students. Alhamdulillah.
SubhanAllah, it's just amazing. He was
Please
just
do share something from that if you feel comfortable, because I know these are personal experiences our person kind of goes through with these, but, you know, if you feel comfortable to share how that was for you. What was it what first kind of prompted you to go as well to study? You know, it's always intriguing, mashallah, to learn.
So I obviously by that time I had started my private practice, and I then at some point made a decision that I just want to practice more in my private practice, help the community, make it more faith-based. And then the opportunity arose. Some of my colleagues from West Midlands we decided that we would go and attend the training. Because, you know, one of the things that I suppose is really important, that when you claim to be something, and that's for me, my work ethos is that if I'm doing something, I really would want to invest time, energy, and academic prowess and knowledge into it. So I thought, you know, talk about Islamic psychology, then I understand that one element of Islamic psychology is obviously tazkiyah, and we want to improve as a therapist. You know, the self of the therapist is that you can't really be a Muslim therapist without connecting with your Islam. So I was at the same time, really, maybe that was a time in my life. My father just passed away, so I was really finding my deen as well. So alhamdulillah, you know, I enrolled on these courses about the tafsir and understanding the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that kind of really gave me that solid grounding that if we're going to think about Islamic psychology, then we need to really learn more about, because obviously it makes sense that you're talking more about, like I said, tazkiyah and nafs and purification of the heart.
Yes.
So alhamdulillah, that opportunity came up, and then I went, and it was it was incredible. He was such, subhanallah, may Allah grant him a lofty place in Jannah and make all of us a source of sadaqah jariyah for him, because he was he was such an amazing storyteller. You know, the lectures were, he would be telling us things, but he had one story after another, one story, and he had, mashallah, he was obviously an elderly man, but he had so much energy and so much focus and clarity, and that really, I was just amazed at how like we would have a long day, so we start early and then finish quite late. But he was go, 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 and you wouldn't see him just saying, okay, so I need a break or whatever. So that really, for me, I understood that strength comes from his inner kind of connection with Allah, and his resiliency is not obviously about the physical strength, it's more about the spiritual strength. And he was an incredible man, mashallah. And I'm sure you've heard that people must have said the same. Anybody who's come across him say the same. Jazakallah khair, yeah.
Could you share any small gems that you could do?
In terms of what he said to us? So I think several stories. So he was obviously, we know that he was a psychiatrist. So he had so many stories about his experiences in Sudan, for instance, when he would see patients, and how he would have to make his colleagues, who were very Eurocentric in their understanding of mental health and completely oblivious of the spiritual dimension. So we had amazing stories. I mean, Zainab, I can't think of any specific one, but things like, you know, he shared stories about how people would respond to recitation of the Quran when their hearts would be, you know, they would be expressing a lot of grief and sadness, and then the recitation would literally soothe them. And for the non-Muslims, obviously, they didn't really understand this as an intervention because it makes no sense to them. So I think throughout that course, what we really came away from, I think I'm not just alone in saying that, is understanding that this toolkit that we have, and subhanAllah, it's in our DNA, it's in our heritage, and we practice it. It's just that you feel like more empowered, that actually, whether we get a certificate from the University of Birmingham or whatever or not, this is very useful, you know, and there is it comes all the way down from the Prophet ﷺ or from Adam ﷺ, and it's here for us to use. So I think that for me, those things came across very, very strongly through that course. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity, alhamdulillah.
Well, let me take you a little bit back and say that I noticed when you said the training can be Eurocentric, but after the experience of being a mother, I get I want to say that once you have that experience, you kind of no longer allow yourself to accept illusion. You have a clear idea about what works and what does not, a clear idea about what is beneficial for the sake of the baby and by extension for other people, or does not. And it might have given you, I think, the courage to fulfill that which works, and in that case, spiritual understanding of what the soul is and what the need of the soul is and what is required for it to be in a good state. Is that a correct statement?
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, Kauthar, for picking up on that. I definitely feel that for us women, and we're four of us here, I think we would all agree that motherhood is just transformational, isn't it? And it brings so much more resiliency and confidence and clarity and courage and creativity in a person, subhanAllah. And definitely, I feel that it's a privilege, isn't it? It's an honor to be a mother, and then that gives you that bravery and clarity. And we see that in our clients, don't we? That mothers have so much more ability to ground themselves and then spiritually connect as well, subhanAllah.
Yeah, it is a role that has been so undermined in recent decades that a lot of work needs to be done in order to let women reclaim that as a power, reclaim that role in a dignified way, and trust their inspired intuition, because it's not something light. And when you speak about it, Dr. Badri, one of the last interviews he gave, I listened to it as a podcast, and the person asking him a question, he told me, "Who is Malik Badri?" And I felt like, okay, someone almost like at the end of his years, he answered the question as if he was like someone of 20 years old or something. I could see the glare, even though it was not recorded. I could see the glare in his eyes while he's answering. I think that what I catch from there is the deep presence in the moment. It's so, I know in our time now, it is so difficult to speak to people about focus. It seems like something that is always fading, or it's always like evasive. But it is a skill that can be developed. You must know from the practice, right? And once one can find that, they can be focused and honest, truthful. All of these spring from presence, subhanAllah.
Definitely. I agree with what you just said there, Kauthar. Jazakallah khair.
I knew Kauthar was going to pick up on the mother comment, and Jazakallah khair, Kauthar. I appreciate you picking up on that. MashaAllah. Now, we would love to move on to the next phase of Ustadha Abeda, where she discovered her journey on psychotherapy path, and now want to say did not accept or rejected the secular way of doing it and started inhaling all what she can find of the Islamic knowledge and spiritual enlightenment and tazkiyah, mashallah. How can you connect your journey to the fields that you're serving Muslims in right now?
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate that. I think when I started, and you can imagine that being a female Muslim, a visible Muslim with a hijab, and I think we have to appreciate that when I started, there were not many women, Muslim women, visible Muslim women training to be especially in the field of porn and sex addiction. So I had to, because I felt that the clients that I was working with, many of them were just amazing, wonderful people, but they were suffering in silence. And the stigma around sex and pornography addiction was just, it's still there, but it was so much back in the days, and nobody was talking about it. It almost like many other things, as a community, we often kind of stand at a distance and we would say, that's not our problem, that's the West problem. So with this one, definitely that was coming across, but it was becoming a visible thing in my therapy room. And as a practicing person, I could actually see that these people were struggling, and they were struggling in the sense that you understand that they were broken. And we know that this whole thing about struggling spiritually and understanding that you're doing something that Allah doesn't want, and then the fear of accountability, the fear of standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not knowing how would you defend yourself. And I was seeing that in my clients. So I knew that these people were not spiritually deviant people. They were people who were struggling with a mental health issue. So for me, I think I connected with that, and I think that gave me the confidence to rise above any kind of vulnerabilities or fears that I had, that, you know, what would people around me say, or how can you, because obviously I was raised in a very traditional household. And now obviously we talk about sex and pornography addiction. For me, back in the days, I had to really, I can tell you that my first day of training, I was really struggling to keep saying the pornography word wouldn't just come out of my mouth. I was struggling with it.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. You must have gone undercover, something like, subhanallah, subhanallah.
Yeah, subhanallah, subhanallah. But I think the moral courage and the strength, obviously, alhamdulillah, may Allah grant my father Jannatul Firdaus. He was probably the person who gave us, all our sisters and brothers, that strength that, you know, whatever you do, if it's within the folds of Islam and boundaries of Sharia, and you see something where you can make a difference, you go ahead and, you know, you do what you need to do for your community. And alhamdulillah, you know, my husband's very supportive. So I can share some funny stories that when I was studying, and one of the rooms that I use for my, you know, my workplace, when we would have family over, I would quickly hide all the books because the covers were not very socially acceptable at the time. So, but alhamdulillah, we plowed through. So I think, like I said, for me, that gave me spiritual strength, really, and it came from that.
It's very inspiring, to be honest. Like, I can totally resonate and understand. Even your words just made me think of a simple couples assessment therapy initially, where you have to address the issue of intimacy. And it becomes such a heavy topic in the room. And I didn't even go to addictions or sex or pornography addiction or anything yet. It was just the simple intimacy topic, and how heavy everything becomes. And people look at each other and, do I say, do I not say, am I wrong? Gaib? What is
What
it
should I
exactly?
say? What is appropriate to be said?
Exactly.
What people say in that situation, because we reach out to things that already exist because we're not willing to share.
Yeah,
SubhanAllah.
absolutely.
But then it gets more complicated, SubhanAllah. Yeah, go ahead, Ustadha.
I was just going to say that I did, because one of the roles that I have, alhamdulillah, is that I teach on Islamic psychology course, where we're doing one of those next week in Oxford, inshallah. It's a 5-day course run by Ehsan from Midlands. So one of the things that I address often is the self of the therapist, and what happens if there's elephant in the room and nobody's comfortable to address that. So I know from my own experience that I had to overcome some of those challenging stigma kind of ridden topics. And from there on, obviously, I went on and did my training in psychosexual therapy as well, exactly for that reason, Aya, that when you are working with a couple, intimacy is the core of the relationship, really. So you can skirt around everything else. You can talk about communication and parenting and rights and responsibilities. But if you're not really comfortable talking about intimacy, then you kind of really leaving a chunk of the problem. And then when the couples come, and then they would say to you that they've been married for 2 years and they haven't really consummated the marriage yet, you will have to address that, because that's obviously a big problem for the couple. So I suppose, in a way, and I suppose that's for many of us, isn't it, that we train according to the needs of our clients, because they need that.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. That last statement is just a huge fact. Yes, we train according to the needs of our clients, subhanAllah. Yeah. But I really appreciated finding you, Ustadha Abeda, because when I attended the ISIP lecture, my mouth was open the whole hour, to be honest. I
Mhm.
was so happy, so excited that you are taking us so surely and confidently through a framework that belongs to us as Muslims, and as clients who are struggling through this. It just made me appreciate and be hopeful. Like I was so hopeful, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, that it exists and it's possible. And I'm thinking, if I'm a psychotherapist, subhanallah, and I'm feeling this way towards the knowledge and towards finding you, alhamdulillah, Allahumma barik, how would clients feel? And how would it make them, and listeners here, and people who would come across this gem of an insight or a knowledge that it does exist? So it just makes us appreciate it more, your courage towards taking these steps and initiating this path. And mashallah, tabarakallah.
It gives hope. It gives hope simply
Absolutely.
because our time is a time of despair. We're like, it is as if everything is preaching despair. And we do not have the right to that because of the teaching of our religion and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. We should not behave as if we're cut off. When you say that people of spiritual strength have some kind of connection, that's the madad, that is the flowing energy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them with by virtue of their relationship to Him.
Indeed. Jazakallah khair. May Allah accept all our sincere efforts and grant us all goodness, inshallah.
Allahumma barik ya Rabb, Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. So we will have another episode, inshallah, with your permission, to go through the process, to go to in depth into more of your thoughts of educating people, just slow baby steps of the resources, what is possible out there, what how they can get it, because I'm sure this will need another full episode. We just don't want to say that in a minute or two. So Jazakallah khair, Ustadha Abeda, for being with us and being such an inspiration. Jazakallah khair.
May Allah accept it. And Jazakallah khair for giving me the opportunity, Aya and Kauthar. I'm really happy to be here and will be very happy to come back. And then definitely, as you said, maybe speak about the process and the treatment plan and the resources that are out there for our brothers and sisters, inshallah.
Yeah. Thank you so
Inshallah.
much.
Jazakallah.
Come whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of living, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come yet again. Come, come. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi.